I work down at S&W Sports. I've been there since September. I work in sales, and I'm also a Liv cycling ambassador. Liv is the women's brand of giant bicycles. So I like to get people all the information they need to know if they're making a bike purchase or you're trying to find out where in town is a good place to ride, and also just basic things on how to take care of a bicycle, how to maintain your bicycle. So first couple things we'll go over is just some basic parts of the bicycle. There's a lot of different terms and it can be confusing when people are talking about them. So we'll start at the front and just work our way back real quick. You have the wheel. The wheel is made of a couple different parts. The hub is the center of the wheel, and attached to the hub are the spokes. And then the spokes are attached to the rim. And then the tire and the tube are the outside. So if you're going into a bike shop and you're just looking for an inner tube for your bicycle, you'll want to ask for a tube, not a wheel or a tire. So the inner tube is the inside of the tire. That's what deflates if you run over like a piece of glass or a thorn or anything like that. The front part of the bicycle here, this is called the fork. Some bicycles, the front fork compresses with suspension, like this one, which is a mountain bike. Some bikes, like hybrids or city bikes, their front forks don't compress, so they're rigid. You have the handlebars here. On the handlebars are the brakes and the shifters. Sometimes if you haven't been on a bike for a while, it's confusing of which side is which. So the way I remember it is right is rear. So your right hand is the back brake and all the gears on the back. Also, up here on the handlebars, on some bicycles like mountain bikes, my seat post is adjustable with a button, so it's called a dropper post. So if I'm going to go downhill suddenly and I want to lower my seat to get it out of the way, I just press the button and the seat goes down, which is pretty nifty. And then so there's the dropper post, the saddle, and then the saddle is on the seat post. This particular bike has rear suspension. A lot of bikes that you see around town are just like hybrids or city bikes, so they won't have rear suspension. So this bike is made for riding on rougher trails, but you could certainly take it on lighter trails. I ride it around town, I ride it to work. You have the back wheel on here. What shifts the bike are the derailleurs. So basically what the derailleurs do is they pick up the chain and they move it to another gear. So when you push a shifter, it pulls on a cable. My cables run through the bike so you can't really see them, but it goes to the derailleur, causes a change in the tension and shifts the chain either up or down. Maintaining your shifters and derailleurs is pretty important. Sometimes if you go to shift your bike and you hear like a rattling or it won't shift all the way, that's a sign that you need an adjustment. Most bicycles, what's nice is right up on the handlebars, you'll see there's little tiny dials that you can turn. You can turn them a little bit to make a slight adjustment. And sometimes a slight adjustment is all you need to do. If you turn it and the rattling gets worse, then turn it the other way. Then it should get better. I try to turn it like a quarter turn at a time. Anything more than that and you can start forgetting what it was originally. If that doesn't fix it, I would just bring it into a bike shop. For little repairs like that, you can look on YouTube. The good thing about YouTube is that anyone can post a video. The bad thing about YouTube is that anyone can post a video. So you'll just want to look at like Park Tool School is a YouTube channel, and it's run by a bicycle tool manufacturer. So if you're looking for information online, that's where I usually go. The wheels are attached on bikes a couple different ways. This particular bike, if I want to take the wheel out, I have to take the axle all the way out. Most bikes, you just open a lever and you can drop the wheel out. On the bike too, there is going to be brakes. My bike has disc brakes on it. It's really similar to like the disc brakes in your car. So there's a rotor and then the calipers with the pads. If you have regular brakes that grab the rim, they're going to be located normally right up here on the fork. If you are going to be taking your wheel off the bike, you do just have to remember to open the brake up first. If you don't open the brake, usually the wheel will get stuck. You can't take the wheel out. I do teach classes at S&W where you can bring your bicycle in, and I'll show you how to take your wheels off your own bicycle and show you how to change a flat tire. Changing a flat is easy once you've done it a couple times, but it can be intimidating, especially putting the wheel back in, and especially if it's the back wheel. A lot of people get nervous about taking the back wheel on and off the bike, and I can show you guys how to do that on my bike. But once you do that a couple times, you're good to go. Also, if you are mountain biking around town, or if you're riding on the road to get to trails, since we'll cover a little bit of mountain biking too in this, it's a good idea to have lights. I always have a blinking red light on the back of my bike. This particular one is really bright, and it can be seen from up to a mile away during the daytime. It can also be seen at night. I turn the mode down at night so I'm not blinding cars, but it's a little bit better than a reflector. Usually if you have a reflector on your bike, cars can't see you until they're really close. So this is just a good extra safety feature. If you are going to be riding at night, which is really fun, I mountain bike around town at night, like especially in Bow and stuff like that, you'll want a really bright light. A normal safety light like that you can get like a bike shop, they're good for people seeing you, but you can't really see very well with them. So this bike light I have on my helmet has a couple different modes, but it's really bright, so I can see perfectly fine even in the really dark woods with a light like this. This particular one is mounted on my helmet, but you can mount them on your handlebars too if it's a little heavy on the helmet. The one downside of mounting it on the handlebars though is if you're going into a corner, you're not able to move the light. It's stuck on the bars, so that's why I like to use it on top of my helmet. So they usually just have to be on a vented helmet. It's just a simple little strap, USB rechargeable, really good to have. The other thing you should always carry with you when you're out riding is a multi-tool. So we sell a couple different ones at the shop. You can get all different types. It's a good idea to look at your bike and see what's on it and figure out what little tools you need to carry. The most common one you'll find on bicycles is like Allen keys or Allen wrenches. They're used to make really simple adjustments. Say you're out riding and you drop your bike and the handlebars turn a tiny bit, you'll need to be able to turn them back. So to do that, there's two little bolts here that attach the stem to the bicycle, and you can loosen them. Let me see if I have the right key. You can loosen them, turn your bars back to where they need to go. I'll show you on mine. Normally there's two, so if you loosen one and it's still not moving, just remember there's a second one on there. So I've loosened this up a little bit. Usually just hold the wheel between your feet. Now you can see this can be moved now. This is good if you need to transport your bicycle and it won't fit in your car really well. You can do something as simple as turning the bars, but if you fall and need to adjust it, you can just turn it back to place. What I normally do when I'm setting it back up is I turn the wheel to the side and look over it. That makes it easier to straighten it back up than trying to hold it between your knees. And you need it to be pretty tight. You don't have to reef on it though. If it's too tight, that's also not good. We do sell, like you can get little torque wrenches to make sure that you're torquing it to the right specs. But if you're ever not sure, or you had to tighten something in an emergency, but you're just not comfortable riding it long term, you can just bring it into the shop and they'll take a look at it and let you know if you need to fix anything. But that's a pretty common one, is the bars accidentally getting twisted. And one thing, someone mentioned it earlier, curious about where you should have your seat height be on your bicycle. The rule of thumb is that when you're sitting on the saddle, like just riding your bike, if you ride a couple pedal strokes and then start to coast, move your heel to be directly over the pedal. So normally you would pedal with like your forefoot on the pedal, but if you just scoot forward and have your heel there, your leg should be completely straight. If your leg is totally straight with your heel on the pedal, that's generally a good indicator that the seat height is about right. It's different for every person, but when you're pedaling, so with your foot back in the normal position, when you're pedaling, you want a slight bend in the knee. If your knee is too bent, after a couple miles, you're gonna feel like your leg is cramping up a little bit, or that you just can't stretch it out enough. But on the other side of that, if your leg is too straightened out, you can be rocking your hips back and forth to try to pedal properly. So just a tiny bend in the knee as you're pedaling. We also do fit services at the shop, so if you feel like you're getting back pain or leg pain or something doesn't feel right on the bicycle, you can always come in for a basic bike fit. So we went over a couple basic things, but I can show you guys now how to take the wheel off of a bicycle. We'll do the back wheel since that's the one that most people are intimidated about because you've got all the gears back there. The easiest way to do it is to get the most slack in the chain as possible. And the way to do that is to downshift. So you'll want to shift the bike into the smallest gear in the front and also the smallest gear in the back. That gives you the most slack in the chain. It's going to make it easier for you to take the bike or the wheel on and off the bike. So if we were in the shop and someone had a flat, we would just put the bike up in the stand and take the wheel off. But when you get a flat and you're out riding, you don't have the luxury of having a bike stand. So it's good to practice doing this with the bike just upside down. Some derailleurs, like my derailleur, they have a mode on them. It's called a clutch, and mine is on right now. So if I tried to take my wheel out, my derailleur actually won't move very much. But if I turn that clutch off, then I have full movement. So you just want to make sure if you do have a bike that has that setting, that you turn it to the off position. So once the bike's flipped upside down, you'll need to take the wheel off. If you don't have disc brakes, you will need to open the brake first. So don't forget that step. I have disc brakes, so I don't have to do that. On my bike, my back wheel comes off by just turning the axle. If you're not sure how to take your wheel off of your bike, you can always just come into the shop and we can show you how to take the wheel off. But on my particular bike, I have to unthread the axle all the way and take it out. Let's actually move this a tiny bit so you can see. So now the axle is out, so I'm able to take the wheel out, but you need to get past the derailleur. So the best way to do that is to grab the derailleur with your hand, pull the derailleur back so it's out of the way. You then lift the bike out, and then you just need to clear that little top section. And then the wheel is off the bike. My particular bike right now is set up with tubeless, so I don't actually have tubes in here. That's gives you an extra benefit of being able to run a lower tire pressure. If you are running tubes and you want to run a low tire pressure, which would give you better traction on mountain bike trails, you run the risk of getting a flat. If you hit something too rough or too quick, the tube can pinch inside the tire. So tubeless setups eliminate the tube. Basically what you have to do is run tape over the inside of the rim. It makes it airtight so that no air can get in or out. You put the tire on, you inflate it quickly with an air compressor to make sure it's on really tight, and there's actually sealant in here. So it's rolling around. Let's see if you can hear it. Can't really hear it, so I probably need to add more. Normally you can hear it if you shake it, but basically what this does is as I'm rolling, if I roll over a piece of glass or if I hit a curb funny, especially if you roll over like a nail, once the nail or glass comes out of the tire, that sealant is gonna keep running over the hole as I'm riding, and it seals itself. You can run over up to, I think, just under a 1/4 inch of something as a cut in the tire, and it will seal itself back up. Even though this type of tire setup is really nice for riding, you can run those lower pressures, I still carry a tube with me, because the downside of tubeless tires is if I'm running pressure that's too low and I hit a curb or something like that, and the bead, which is the wire that attaches the tube to the tire to the rim, if that falls off or it loses that contact, my wheel's flat. And there's really no way to get it to be back on there without using like an air compressor or something like that. So you still should bring a tube with you, but this is just an option for mountain biking. When you put the wheel back on the bicycle, it's just the opposite of what you did before. One thing that's nice about putting it back on when it's upside down, it practically does the work for you. So what I normally do, oh, and this is also why I always put it into the smallest gear and the smallest gear, because I know now that if I put the chain on this smallest cog here, that's the place it's supposed to be. If you just flip your bike over and take your wheel out and try to put your wheel back in, your derailleur is probably not going to be in the right spot, so it's going to make a lot of noise. So what I usually do, and I have to be a little more careful because I have to line up this rotor into the disc brake. What I normally do is lift up the chain, put it right on that small cog. That way I'm basically telling it where it's gonna go. Pull back on the derailleur, line the chain up on the bottom, because that's really where it needs to be, and then slowly lower the wheel, making sure that I'm clearing the disc brake. And now that's back in the spot. Now, I do have an axle, so I have to put the axle back in, don't forget that. But if you have, most bikes have a quick release, I mentioned it earlier, it's just a lever, and you loosen one side, there you just take the wheel in and out, you don't have to worry about the axle. But on this bike I do. So to put the axle back in, I have to thread mine. Oh, actually wrong side. I have to thread mine through. And I just wait for it to catch. Then you turn it until it's tight. And it's a good idea to check and just make sure, spin the wheel a couple times, make sure it sounds pretty quiet. If it's sounding like it's making a lot of grinding noises, it's probably a sign that the gears are just not aligned right. So that's when you can just shift from down here and get yourself into that smallest cog. I usually take the wheel back out and then put the wheel in. Sometimes on disc brakes, depends on which ones you have, but when you put the wheel back in, you can hear a little bit of rubbing. That's a sign that it's probably not aligned right, so take the wheel out, put it back in. Don't forget, if you don't have disc brakes, when you flip the bike back over, you have to put your brake back together because it's not connected. So that's how you take the back wheel on and off a bicycle. Now you can see on the tire here, this is the end of the lever. You want to kind of try to line that up so that it's not sticking out like this. It's not a huge deal on my bike, but on the quick release style tires, all it takes is a rock flipping up and hitting that, and sometimes it can pop open. So it's a good idea to just line it up somewhere like that, where it's up against the frame. It's not going to be able to be opened if you hit a rock or anything. So that's normally what I do. Because we moved the gears into the smallest cog and the smallest cog, you're going to want to change that once you start riding. You might be able to tell, you can come up and look after if you want to, but right now in the smallest and the smallest, the chain is at a really sharp angle. So if I were to try to ride my bike like this, you'll get grinding noises. The chain is really loose, right? That was the point of getting the tire off. It was really, really loose. It made it easy, but then it's going to be slapping around while you're riding. So you're just going to want to shift into a more middle gear that's going to make the chain a little more tight. And then I'll turn my clutch back on. So some other good things to carry when you're out riding is a spare tube. I usually bring a small pump. You can get CO2 cartridges also. Those allow you to fill the tires up really quickly. Hi guys. But a spare tube, there are patch kits, and you've probably seen them. You can use patch kits to patch a tube in an emergency, but if you ever use one, you really should just get a new tube. Patches are a quick fix. They're designed to get you home. Some of them come pre-glued. That's basically like putting a little Band-Aid on the tube. Those ones really need to be replaced. If you're buying patches that you glue and then put on the tire, they're a little stronger, but they do affect the tube, so you really should just replace it. Does anybody have any questions or anything like that? Yeah.
On the topic of safety.
Yes.
You're saying you're driving on the
Yes.
riding at night.
Yep.
What about riding during the day on the road? What
Yep.
side is the best?
You should always ride with traffic. normally it's against the law to ride against traffic. You should stay off the sidewalk. A lot of places there's bike lanes or a shoulder that you can be in. That's where you should be riding. You should be riding with traffic. You should be stopping at stop signs, stopping at stoplights. I normally try to leave distance between myself if I'm coming up to like a stop sign and other cars. It's good to point which direction that you're turning when you're on the way to the trails or when you're riding. That's why at night I definitely always have a really bright light. A piece of reflective clothing is a good idea too. Even just one if you're throwing it on your backpack, just to give people a better chance that they're gonna see you. And then if you are going mountain biking, which is kind of what we're talking about, it's a good idea too to always bring a first aid kit. I normally bring a bag about this size with me. Whenever I go riding, I usually put gauze in there, Band-Aids. If you get stung by a bee, I bring those little sting pads, in addition to bringing your tubes and everything like that. Depending on how tight your tires are on the rim, you may or may not need them. They're called tire levers. Has anyone ever used these before? Yeah. So what these do, you let all the air out of the tube, and then that makes the tire really soft and you're able to get it off the rim, but sometimes it's so tight, you use these, it has a little scoop end, and you pick that up underneath the tire and the rim, and that allows you to take the tire off instead of having to use your hands. Mountain bikes are usually pretty easy, but road bike tires or hybrid tires sometimes can be really tight, so these make it extremely easy to take the tires off the wheels. It's also always a good idea to bring water with you. You never know if you're going for like an hour mountain bike ride and you get a flat and it takes you a while to fix it, or like me, I have the tubeless setup, so if I had something go wrong with my tires and need to be there longer, it's definitely always a good idea to bring plenty of water. If I'm going with friends, I usually make sure before we head out that they have lights if we're going mountain biking at night. Even when you're in the woods, it's good to have a basic light, just so that people, if they're following behind you, can see you, or if there are other people mountain biking on the trails, that you're giving them a heads up that you're coming, because it's so wooded in most of the trails here that you could be just around the corner and still really not see someone. So yeah, that about does it. Thanks guys for coming.